This is Candid Conversations with Dr. Mayfield, a podcast that resources families and friends with tools to have important conversations about mental and emotional health. This show is sponsored by Mayfield Counseling Centers, helping you find clarity, hope, and purpose. Here's your host, Trevor Sheeran.
Thank you for joining us on Candid Conversations. We are so glad to be here. I'm Trevor Sheeran, joined as always by Dr. Mayfield.
Hey.
And today we're talking about a conversation that, honestly, I'm not entirely sure where it's going to go. But we're going to talk about nostalgia, primarily what it is, and then whether or not it's a good or bad thing. Which
always good.
Always good?
I think so.
Always. It's never been bad.
No, it's
ever.
Period. We'll go there.
You heard it here. So, Dr. Mayfield, what is nostalgia? What does this phrase mean?
I think a lot of times it's looking back on past events is better than they actually were.
Mm-hmm.
I think, or remembering things. I think this is just how our brain assimilates things in a lot of ways. I don't know if cope is the right word, but I think it's our way of looking fondly on the past versus and editing out some of the things that have bad. Yeah. I think another way to look at it too, I always tell my clients this idea of state emotions, STATE, just our body's way of remembering, and our brain is always taking in information, even when we're not paying attention. Yeah. Sounds, smells, taste, touch, that kind of stuff. Yeah. And I use this example all the time that one of my most nostalgic smells is honeysuckle. Mm-hmm. If I go into a candle store or I walk down the street, we don't have it here in Colorado as much, but the honeysuckle plant was everywhere in my grandmother's yard in California. Yeah. And, had a lot of good memories of playing in that backyard and swimming in the pool and all that kind of stuff. And so when I smell it, I get taken back to that feeling, that euphoria, that memory. And I can put myself, even if I think about it right now, back in her backyard. But that was a 5.5, 6, 7, 8 year old perspective. Yeah. And so I don't remember, unless it was traumatic, I don't remember much of the bad stuff. I remember that kind of that nostalgic piece. But one of the things we brought up before we started recording was this, why are the 90s so nostalgic? And
which, honestly, maybe a little bit of the millennial in me.
Or the 80s. Yeah. But as we start seeing, it's funny because Sarah and I were talking about this yesterday. I'm like, are shoulder pads back in style?
Yeah.
And we have our cousin living with us right now, and she started laughing. She's in her early 20s, and she goes, "No, they're trying, but it's not going to happen." Yeah. Or parachute pants, or the flat top, or
the cycle of fashion,
right? The mutton chop sideburns. It's. But why? How do you experience nostalgia? How do you see it?
Well, you touched on something that I think is really important. That sense of smell has a strong connection to our memory. Stronger than some of our other senses, for sure. And so being able to smell something that brings you back is such a common experience. I think for me, I recognized pretty early on, because during high school, I was miserable, I was depressed, I was self-harming, I was trying to kill myself, like all of these things. And so it wasn't a good time.
Right.
And there shouldn't be anything that I look back on it and I'm like, oh, that was so I liked that time. But there are times when I look back on that season and I'm like, oh, things were nice back then. And recognizing kind of, I call it a little bit of the Michael Scott syndrome. So Michael Scott,
for those that don't know,
is a character from The Office show. And he has several pretty rough relationships through the seasons, and at one point he goes back and he contacts all of them because he has essentially an ingrown hair on his lip that he thinks is herpes, and blah, blah, a whole story. But he calls them, and he's trying to have this rekindling of the romance with each person, even though one abused him and another one he proposed on the third date, and all of these things that just don't make sense, but his heart is longing to go back to that time. And I think we can so often romanticize the past, and especially in moments of distress, we can say like, oh, things weren't this bad back
weren't that
then.
bad. What are you talking about? Yeah, no.
Even though they probably weren't all that different.
No. And I think that's it's the taking a look at the past through the eyes of our maturity and our experiences today that I think that changes that, right? So I could sit here today going, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is hard, this is hard, this is hard. Man, I wish, there was such a simpler time back when we first got married. Well, no, I was in grad school and we were barely scraping 2 pennies together, and that was stressful.
Yeah.
But why was that nostalgic? Well, it was I don't, and so I think it's okay to reflect on those kind of things. I do think, though, you asked the question, is nostalgia good or bad? I think it's good in a lot of ways because it's a chance for us to reflect on our past and our fond memories, maybe to reintegrate some of the things that we did back then into now.
Yeah.
Please no shoulder pads or parachute pants or, those kind of things. But it could be a chance for us to reflect, to give thanks, and then to make sure that we're taking advantage of those moments now. It could be bad, though, if we get stuck there. And I joke that there's no bad, but there is bad because I think you've met those people that are like not at all engaged on the present or their future. They're always just fawning over the past.
Yeah. And I think, I enjoy the world of nerdiness, and there's a lot of nostalgia pieces in the nerdiness. And I've seen some individuals who are so invested in collecting comic books from, decades ago and memorabilia. And I've seen two sides of this. The side that incorporates it into their daily life, where they get to interact with people in stores about, hey, did you ever read this one? It was so good. It really reminds me of what they're trying to do now, and really taking it and engaging it into the here and now. The other side is an isolated version of that, where I don't want to interact with the now because the now isn't comfortable. And I think I'm recognizing, just even as we're talking, how much of nostalgia can kind of be a distress tolerance tool, where things feel really hard right now. So I'm going to jump back in time to where I've kind of lost the memories of what wasn't so good.
Right.
I think that we do that. I think that as a culture, we're slowly seeing that too, because it seems, and some of this is me as a 26-year-old, I've only had that much life experience, and less so that I can actually draw from. But it seems as though nostalgia has grown in intensity over the past decade or so. And
I would say probably 3 decades.
3 decades.
So probably last 30 years.
And I think for me at least, and probably some other people from my generation, some of that has to do with how the world has changed since the millennia. And if I remember when I was 6 years old, I was celebrating my birthday on the day of Columbine. And Columbine was horrible and shocking to the culture and devastating. And then 2 years later, 9/11 happens, and the same process of horrifying, unexpected, how could this be part of reality? And as we have gone through the past almost 2 decades, it seems like things like at least Columbine, not so much 9/11, but Columbine are frequent and commonplace and just to be expected. And so I think there may be a part of our society that longs to go back to a time before the things that hurt so bad.
Well, and I also think, as you say that, I've been thinking about, the iPhone just celebrated its 12th birthday.
Yeah.
Right? So social media, internet came out, to the public in 94?
To the public, yeah.
In 94. And I think a lot of us, at least in my generation, yearn for the simpler times of, the house phone with the cord and the, you had to get up and turn the channels on the TV, and, we were more connected with people in our neighborhood and our family than we were online. And I think there's parts of me that yearn for that as well, because that was more, at least the appearance of more of a simpler time. Yeah. But then I vividly remember sitting in my living room in California and my mom and dad turning the TV on, and, Iraq War happened in '89. I remember the Challenger explosion in, so I think every generation's got their moments of
Totally.
Events that they wish, okay, before that happened, it was so much simpler.
Yeah.
But I do think you're right that since Columbine, it's been every year something has happened, right?
Yeah, and if we look at nostalgia from this perspective of distress tolerance, it makes sense that we would want Pokemon back, or that we would want 90s shows
you
back,
have it back.
or we do.
I know.
We do.
Yeah, okay.
We've gotten real good. As the kids who grew up on that have been able to create games.
Right.
We've figured it out. But it makes a lot more sense from that perspective, and I think the beauty of it, like, we talk about that bad of being stuck in it or so focused on it, or anytime we use a distress tolerance skill to just escape and not engage and grow through and work through, it can be more harmful than it is beneficial. The beneficial part is, I'm actually going to go with the Pokemon idea of years ago, we had Pokemon Go come out, which was where you had your phone and it was connected to the GPS and you walked around and you tried to collect Pokemon. And for at least a full month, you would find people walking around with their phones and like looking up and taking pictures, and then you'd be
Creating
like,
traffic jams.
Pokemon Go? What color? And like, so there was this strange connection that happened at the same time. And I think that was really beautiful because it drew us together and it made us remember together some of the things that we loved about that series and that time of life. And we're able to pull it into our current lives and say like, hey, you want to like go to this place? I heard that they have this thing. Let's go together.
Yeah, and for those of us that are older, geocaching.
Totally.
Right. Is that where no phone, you have your phone out because you're looking at coordinates and all that kind of stuff. My father and mother-in-law they have a geocaching bag, and we go every time we go, and it's fun. It is fun, but I think it's some of that nostalgic piece too of tromping through the woods and finding things and all that kind of stuff. But you think of what was it? There's how many Despicable Me's are there? Despicable
3, I think.
3. So the second one with the little bratty kid is that the second one?
I've only seen.
I don't remember.
I haven't seen many.
But I think that's a bad example. That's an example of a bad nostalgic because he was this 1990s, 1980s like kid wizard actor, and he got all the fame, and then when his voice changed and he got pimples, and all that kind of stuff. But he stayed in that character even into adulthood, and he wouldn't let it go, and that was his persona. I think all of us have friends from high school that are like, you haven't really grown up, and I know I'm coming up, dun dun dun, on my 20-year reunion, and it'd be interesting to go back and see who's changed, who's not, who's held on to the 90s, and who's moved on, and you're not as far removed from high school, but I still think the same thing, right?
Totally.
Who has stayed in that. And I think a lot of what we find too is, and I'm not dissing this because I think there's a real outlet for people, but video games, like how much, I know people that are, video games 6-7 hours a night after they get home from work. And I'm like, okay, that could be nostalgic.
Totally.
So my question for you is what is nostalgia providing us? So if we are nostalgic, if we are stuck in nostalgia, if it's not something, what is that? What need is being met? And I ask that question so it gives me a chance to think about it myself because I think it's multifaceted.
I think so too. Obviously, like I mentioned before, that distress tolerance, being able to escape to a different time. I think that also one thing that I've realized in my life of there will be times when like I wish I could go back and do high school over as me now.
Oh, 100%.
Because I would be so great at all of the
look
things.
At my hair. Like my hair is cool now, and
Right.
it wasn't. And I look like or no.
And I think some of that, what I'm realizing is that more than likely, Trevor 10 years from now will be able to say the same thing about Trevor now. And that it's just a matter of competency and confidence. And I've been there. I remember that. I grew through it. I learned things afterwards. And feeling like now, because I've learned things, I could go back and do that better. And there's a sense of like, almost this like I would be a super person if I could go back in time and do that over. And so it, in a strange way, for me at least, can boost my confidence of, if I look back on some of the YouTube videos back in 2000s, like the quality of content was sometimes there.
No, it wasn't.
And chocolate rain. And then there, some of the production value and being able to think like, if I compare myself to that, like, yeah, I'm doing a really great job, but that's an unfair comparison in a way that kind of boosts my ego, but isn't realistic.
So you want to be Marty McFly?
Yeah,
And go Back to the Future.
Yeah, then I'd invest in Apple and Amazon and Google,
Starbucks,
and just it's all about money, man.
What's funny, I mentioned Marty McFly to somebody the other day, and they were probably in their early 20s, and they looked at me like, I'm like, come on, seriously? You have
Join me in the nostalgia.
You have no idea who Back to the Future is and all that kind of stuff. And it's hilarious. Or, when I'm in class teaching, and it's funny because, students are getting younger and younger, and I'm getting older and older. But
how time works that way.
It's interesting how, and I'll just go Bueller, and nobody knows what I'm talking about. I'm like, guys, we're going to just take class time and watch movies because you need to help me out here. But that's those comments that I make like that and things that, that's nostalgia.
Yeah.
Right.
And connecting.
Connecting.
You're trying to find a way to connect
right.
with another person. Whenever I bring up The Office or Lord of the Rings or anything in that realm, there's an immediate connection that's made because they know, and we have things to talk about, and we can engage in that way.
So, I'd like our listeners to email us. What are you nostalgic about? It'd be fun to do a survey on that. We'll post it on our Facebook and, YouTube. But it'd be interesting to get some comments back on what is your nostalgic piece.
Yep. And I'll say it before anybody has the chance to say it. Like, saying I'm nostalgic for a time before Candid Conversations is not the right answer.
That's not okay. That's hurtful. That's really hurtful.
My sarcastic, cynical brain just went right there.
Yep, no, that's good.
And I think we can do that too.
Right,
There's the side of nostalgia too that isn't that romantic, beautiful, like, oh, I wish it was back then. But also it can be a negative, like, I wish this didn't exist, like before taxes. I don't think there was no. It wasn't. Before death.
Right.
Same thing.
Yeah,
so it all existed.
So before we totally blow this episode up, email us, Candid at Mayfield Counseling, or post on Facebook or or on YouTube, and let us know what you're nostalgic for. Yeah, and we'd love to read that. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for joining Candid Conversations. If you would like more information, you can email candid@mayfieldcounseling.com or call 719-452-4803.